Okay.
All right.
All right.
Hey, everybody. It is Angie Atkinson, and it is Tuesday, February the 27th, 2018. I'm here with the beautiful and talented Dana Morningstars. Say hey, Dana.
Thank you. Hello. Hello. Thank you, Angie.
My pleasure. And while I'm waiting for the chat to pop up, let me just remind you that my name's Angie. I already said that. And on this channel, I offer free daily video coaching to help you discover, understand, and overcome narcissistic abuse in toxic relationships. I like to call it toxic relationship rehab. So if that sounds good to you, hit that subscribe button and we'll get going. Hey, everybody. Hello, Jillian. Hello, Court Shannon, Mary Hanks, Las Miranda, X Dude, Cute Rabbit, Healthy Love. Goodness, Tanitra Scott, Sansu Wellness, Denise Steele. Okay, hello everybody. Hello, everybody says hi, Dana.
Very cool. Hello. So let me get to your YouTube channel so I can
Yep.
see the chat too.
Right on. Mary Hanks says hi there. Sven Mina, hi. While she's doing that, Nicole Angelina, yay. She says, yes, I made it. Healthy Love is happy to listen. Donna Doherty says, hello there, beautiful, strong tribe. And Court Shannon says, just made some dandelion tea. Perfect timing, y'all. What's up? Hello, Malta. And Adrian and Jamie Lynn, shifting from a victim to a survivor. Excellent. Dana, feel free to jump in. I'm not trying to just take over the whole thing.
Okay. No, good deal. Yeah. It's so fun to see all these different familiar faces in a different place.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. So guys, tell us what's going on. Tell us what you need today. I saw somebody say help up there. So fill us in. What can we do for you? Okay, we have Wendy Wonka. Great name. Wendy Wonka.
That's cute.
Yeah, it is. Sven Maria says, is there a dude here? Yep, there's a dude here. Dude X.
Yep. There's always like a handful of dudes. Sometimes they participate and sometimes they don't, but they are here.
They are here.
So guys go through this too, for sure.
And definitely.
Okay, Angie, we got a question for you from Las Miranda. My goodness, that's quite the name. Denise Willia. So nice. Last Miranda, how do you get rid of a toxic friendship? The person is not abusive, but highly unhealthy in different ways, and I can't take it anymore to be friends with this person.
Great question. So depending on how connected you are, sometimes you might just want to take a little time and space yourself out, sort of drift away, right? But if it's somebody that you're seeing every day, you're going to have to take a more serious approach. So is this somebody that you're living with? Is this somebody that you're just passing? Give us a little bit more information. I would say if you're dealing with someone in a typical friendship where you're, maybe texting back and forth, seeing each other once or twice a week, then I would just recommend that you sort of begin to move away from that person by being around other people, having plans, being busy. Now, if you think that, like, if this person is your best friend, or they think they're your best friend or whatever, then you might need to be a little more direct and say, listen, I need a little space. This is too toxic for me. In my situation, I had a friend who was quite toxic. It was a work friend, so that was hard. It was before I knew anything about any of this stuff. And so one of the things I did was I just started to sort of try to involve other people in our friendship. So I was sitting with different groups at work and inviting her to join us, and she was not interested. She was just a very negative person. So she eventually dumped me, which was okay. But that was kind of the way I dealt with it. Dana, what would you say to this person?
I think you're absolutely right on. It's kind of distancing yourself by any means necessary in whatever way you're comfortable doing. And I also wanted to point out, so I think all of your advice, Angie, was absolutely spot on. Just keeping busy and letting things kind of just drift apart naturally. But I also wanted to point out that Last Miranda brought up a really good point that I think flies under the radar of so many of us, especially when people are fresh out of an abusive situation, is she made the comment that this friendship is toxic. This person wasn't necessarily abusive, but that it was unhealthy. And I think, for realizing that that's enough of a reason to leave. And so I think so many of us have waited until things have gotten basically intolerable before we jumped ship. And, something that's just toxic, or even something that's simply not nourishing enough, it's up to you to decide whether or not to continue that or try to work on it or whatever you want to do. But you don't need to stay somewhere that for sure is emotionally draining you.
Yeah.
So
And
good insight.
absolutely. I agree with you 100%. She adds here that it's a typical friendship, and I tried to fade away slowly, but it doesn't work. It feels like I have to tell her straight to her face, but I don't want to hurt her feelings. This is another really good point. I think, and Dana, tell me what you think. I think that we are people pleasers by nature, and especially when we have been in these relationships, and none of us enjoy confrontation. What about you, Dana? Would you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think one of the things you're going to want to do is consider, if you have to tell her straight to her face, then you're just going to have to suck it up, and you're going to have to say, this is really uncomfortable for me, but I feel like I'm not, how would you say it? I feel, and you could even make it your own problem, because it doesn't, obviously you're not going to be able to change her. So you could just say, I'm really stressed out with my life right now. I just need to be by myself for a while, or I'm just going to do my own thing for a while. Dana, do you have any better ideas for verbiage?
I think you're absolutely spot on. If you make it your issue and not her issue, because if you make it her issue, like, well, you know what, you're just really difficult and you're really negative, of course she's going to feel attacked. Anybody would. Mm-hmm. And she's going to want to argue that. Yep. And then you're going to get caught up in this argument that it's going to be really hard to get out of, and things are going to escalate, and it's just going to get worse. So, I would just make it about you, like what Angie was saying, like, hey, my life has really kind of taken a different direction, or, I've just been really busy lately, and I feel like we're going in two very different directions, and just make it about you. And then, and then doing things like, if she calls you, send it to voicemail. If she texts you, wait a few days to get back to her, just letting things kind of slowly start fizzling out. And if you do need to have the direct conversation, then like we were just talking about, putting it on you.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. 100%. Yep.
There was, okay, Angie, here's another question for you from Jessica. Okay. And this is a big one. I think it's probably a question you get often. How do you co-parent with a narcissist?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Okay. So that's a good one. First of all, you don't. You parallel parent with a narcissist. You cannot, as long as the narcissist is not directly physically or emotionally abusing your children, they're going to do things differently than you're going to, sometimes just because you're doing them differently, just to kind of get under your skin. So like, let's say you say bedtime is 8 p.m. because your children are under 7 or whatever. And the narcissist at their house, they're like, we don't need no stinking bedtime, or whatever. Or vice versa. You say bedtime is 10:30 because your kid's 15, and the narcissist says you go to bed at 8 p.m. at my house. Well, you just have to tolerate that. But now if we're getting to the place where, your children are being physically abused or emotionally abused at the narcissist's home, then you have to kind of involve CPS or attorneys or courts or whatever. And that sucks. But the best thing I can say to you in those cases is document. If you see physical marks on your child, take photos, call the police, CPS, whoever it is in your area that you would contact. Don't tolerate abuse of your children, but do understand that narcissists see their children as extensions of themselves. And the larger majority of them, while they might kind of mess with their heads a little bit, they don't usually physically abuse them. So if you're doing good, strong parenting at home, and they're just going there for the weekends, and they're just kind of, lackadaisical, or they're even a little controlling, you teach your child how to deal with a narcissist in the most appropriate way possible. In the situation where there's abuse happening, go to the courts. I went to the courts with my oldest son, and I said, he can't be alone with him. And they said, with his child. And they said, why not? And I told them, and they said, okay, write a letter. And then they gave me sole custody. So if you have a legitimate concern, bring it to the court. Don't be scared. Dana, what would you say about this?
I agree with you. I think it's, it's important for parents to pick and choose your battles. And, the larger point at hand, the goal is to win the war, and winning the war, you might lose a few of those battles. So like Angie was saying, if you're squabbling about bedtime or who's seeing who win and picking each other up, there's a difference between things that are inconvenient and then things that are actually damaging to the child. And again, like Angie was saying, that you're going to have to parallel parent or even counter parent. or they're going to try to counterparent with you. So it can be incredibly challenging. I would just say validate your child as much as you can if they're coming to you with any concerns, and the extreme stuff, yeah,
Yeah.
document, take it to court, see about getting things changed.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jillian says it might be helpful for some of us if both of you explain the difference between parallel parenting and co-parenting within the context of what to expect. And I think we kind of just did that, but I think, to make it clear, parallel parenting is you parent your way, they parent their way, and you just parent kind of next to each other instead of together. And that sucks. But unfortunately, if you're dealing with a narcissist, that's your best bet, because then you don't have to, like Dana said, you don't have to squabble over the little things that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Now, if you are not the custodial parent, this is a little different and it's harder. But the best thing you can do is teach your child communication, teach your child, what matters, what doesn't matter. Make sure that if you have one of the things I've seen a lot with co-parenting with a narcissist is the phone issue. Mom buys the phone, dad searches the phone, dad uses the phone, or vice versa to spy on the other parent and all this kind of stuff. And that's really unhealthy. So in that case, I would say don't send the phone with the kid if that's the case, and that sucks. Or send a specific phone, for that visit, and have a different phone at home. I don't know. But any other thoughts on that, Dana, before we move on?
Yeah. So, well, I would just add, co-parenting is what, two people that have like an amicable divorce are able to do. You're running a three-legged race,
Mm-hmm.
right? With the ultimate goal of producing a happy, healthy, well-adjusted child. When you're divorced from a person that has this pathological personality, it's next to impossible to run a three-legged race with them. And the sooner a person can get clear on that, like kind of all bets are off. If it's, you're wanting to have this fantasy of, being able to work as a team, like that will never happen under any circumstances with a person who's driven by dominance and deceit.
Yes.
So to just realize what you're going into, and then once you fully embrace it, and that does take some time to fully embrace that, because it's just normal, decent people. They're not wired that way. Like, it's really hard for us to understand.
Yeah.
There are people out there that are like this. Once you fully understand this, then you're not going to be caught off guard by it so much. Yeah. Then you're going to quit being surprised by like, oh my goodness, why did this, why did this untrustworthy person act untrustworthy? Like you're not caught up in that. Like, okay, of course, my ex, who's driven by dominance and deceit, is going to do something based around dominance and deceit.
Excellent point.
And then once you can fully accept that's the person that you're dealing with, then you can start to anticipate it and head off a lot of this stuff. So then you're not falling into these traps that they've laid.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, totally. Good point. All right. X dude says, I need tips so that I can sit to study without distraction, so that I can study well and run away from home. But the narcs in my life keep finding ways to pull me down. Plus I dissociate, so I need help. That's tough. Okay. I'll throw this in. I'll tell you, one of the things that has been really useful for me, and that was useful for me, if you can, wait a minute. So I study well and run away from home. Hold on. Are you over 18? If you are not over 18, please don't run away from home. Please be careful and do what you need to do. If you are being abused, then you should talk to your school counselor or your teacher. Any mandated reporter can help you. If you're over 18, then I would suggest go to Starbucks or the library or anywhere that you can. And if that's not possible, get some noise canceling headphones and lock your door, put a sign on the door, studying, can't talk. Any thoughts on this, Dana?
I think you covered it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. You got another one? It looks like you're looking at something.
Yes. Somebody had asked, let me scroll up, about why don't psychopaths want to change?
Great question. I think they don't think there's anything wrong with them. And in general, if they are intelligent enough to recognize that they are in fact a psychopath or a narcissist or a sociopath or anything like that, they sort of enjoy it a little bit. They think it's amazing, and if they're not intelligent enough to recognize it, then they just don't think anything's wrong with them. But Dana, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree completely. If a person's behavior is consistently working for them, right? If they're able to lie and cheat and steal and continue to get away with it, they're going to keep doing that. So the only thing that a person like that understands is consequences, and they need to be swift and severe.
Yes.
But if they're surrounded, and again, something that so many of us fall into is we think, oh, well, just given enough time and understanding and love and second and 22nd chances and rehab and religion and all of these things, that eventually this person will change. And that's not what wakes them up, because they just learn how to manipulate better, because there are no consequences. Like,
Yes.
people stay in their life and everybody's thinking like, well, I just need to be more compassionate and I need to forgive. And you've got a manipulative person who's looking around thinking you guys are all suckers. Like, I'm just going to keep telling you whatever you need to hear. And I'm going to blame you and my alcohol and the other people and my childhood, everybody else, for why I'm doing stuff, because they just don't have consequences. And, so if a person's behavior works for them, they're not going to experience the pain needed in order to actually change it. Because that's why most of us in general ever realize that we need to change. We have that wake up moment of, oh my God, what I'm doing is not working for me, right? Like, you get a DUI, or, you have a painful confrontation with a friend, or, something major happens that shakes you awake, where you're like, oh, wow, okay, I need to do something different. They don't have that. And so when a person doesn't have guilt or empathy or remorse, like, they're not going to change. And especially, like I said, especially if their behavior is working for them, and especially if they're sadistic and they really enjoy stirring things up and causing other people pain and bringing chaos and destruction wherever they go, it makes them feel smug and superior. And
Yes.
they stir that pot and they sit back and they watch it boil over, and they're like internet trolls, and they just like, oh, blah, ha, ha, look at what I've done now.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right.
Ugh,
Spot on. Yeah.
exhausting.
That is yes. I can't tell you how many times I said, "Oh my God, I'm so exhausted." During those relationships, I can't believe, and I hear that all the time from people. I'm sure you do too. Yeah, it's something else. Now, Marianne McDonald, I want to answer your question. Marianne O'Donnell, I want to answer your question, but please give me a few more details on the court situation so that we can be a little more accurate. And Janelle McRae says, I need help getting out of this house. He finds ways to block my income in every way possible. He also finds ways to keep me in the house using my child. Now, this I understand. Okay, so I'm just going to say really quickly a couple of things. Number one, consider starting some kind of work at home deal. And PayPal, my friend, is your friend, because PayPal can be in your name only, and you can put all the money in the PayPal or something like PayPal. Stripe is another option. I like PayPal. It's simple. You can get a debit card. You can hide the debit card or just leave it. Don't order it until you're ready to go, if need be. But using your child is very difficult. I mean, I guess we would need a few more details, but I would say where there's a will, there's a way. And I know it's hard, but I mean, look, I had a 16-month-old child, and I had a job making very little money at the time, because I had a job where I could take him to work with me. I was a breastfeeding consultant. This is a long time ago.
That's very cool.
It was cool, yeah. But it was not a high-paying job. It was certainly not enough to support myself. It was a little part-time job. But I needed, anyway, long story short, I did it anyway. And sometimes you need to ask people for help. I found a situation where a friend of a friend had moved her mother into a nursing home, and the house was sitting in a neighborhood that wasn't that great, and they wanted somebody to live in the house until they sold the house. So I was able to stay there for free and just pay the utilities and save up my money so I could buy another house. You know what I mean? So I saved up enough for a down payment to buy a little tiny house for my son and I. And my point is, there are lots of things. I would go to queenbeing.com/plan, PLAN, and you'll be able to download for free, no sign up required or anything, the plan, which includes lots of ideas. And there's a couple of videos embedded there that offer some other ideas. Like somebody suggested to me during a live stream one day, stay in a cheap motel. And that sounds horrible and awful, but you know what? You've got like a lot of them have microwaves in the room. You can get a little hot plate. If you just have one child, it's not going to be that bad. Just for a short period of time, stay in like an extended stay motel. It's got, $100 a week sometimes if you're lucky. And it's not the best thing, but it's a way to get out and start making money, and in the meantime, take whatever money you can and put it somewhere he can't touch it, like a PayPal account or a secret bank account, something like that. Dana, please, your thoughts on this.
I think that's a great suggestion. I'd never thought about that before, about using PayPal. You can also see about getting a bank account at a different bank. So like if you normally bank at Wells Fargo, maybe try Bank of America, something like that.
Yeah.
And just getting it in your name without any other authorized users. And, working towards putting money aside. You just want to make sure. I like the PayPal idea better than what I'm saying. And the reason being is, well, I guess if you're going to do a physical bank account, the concern with that is the statements. You just don't want it. You want to make sure that you do online statements, that no paper statements are coming to your house so they can actually see what you're up to.
Yeah.
Calling,
get a PO box.
Yeah, get a PO box. That's a great idea. That's huge. So you can start just to err on the side of caution in case something happens. You can get your mail there. And then even after you do leave, I always recommend that people keep a PO box for at least a year after they move. Have all of your mail forwarded to that PO box. Nobody needs to know. That's the thing. It's so hard after you do leave, is other people most people do not understand what abusive relationships are and how terrifying they can be. And they might think that you're overreacting, and they just might not be as cautious with your information as that they need to be. And so I'm a big fan of, really being very cautious about who you let know your actual physical address. And you can meet people at a coffee shop, you can meet people outside of your house, but just being very aware of, just keeping things kind of close to your chest, I guess is what I'm saying.
Smart. Yeah.
And then you might also want to contact maybe like your local domestic violence center and see if they can help you formulate a more involved safety plan.
Yeah. And a lot of churches, sometimes, I know a lot of Catholic churches, and I'm not even a religious person really, but I know a lot of Catholic churches have programs in place for helping pay bills and things like that for short periods of time. And like Dana said, the domestic violence centers, like around here, there's a place called Lydia's House where it's run by, I think it's the UCC runs it. And it's a place where they give you like an apartment and a phone. People donate their old phones to Lydia's House all the time so they can use it to start with for 911 calls, at least, you know what I mean? But nowadays they're even increasing that. But lots of different organizations out there. Start doing your research. Be very careful if he watches your internet history. Go to the library and do the research. That's an idea.
Yes. And Verizon also normally has free phones for people trying to leave abusive situations. And also what you're saying about churches too, is oftentimes if you go to a church and say, hey, I'm in need, this is my situation, I'm trying to leave, I'm scared, I don't have any money, they may be able to help with kind of some short-term funds and or resources, furniture, clothes, Yeah.
I know one church that I know about that has a parsonage that they don't use. And I've seen them put people in the parsonage like for a few months in order to help them get on their feet in situations just like this. So the thing is, you're going to have to be strong enough to ask for help. Don't look at asking for help as a weakness. Look at it as a strength. It's hard for us, isn't it, to ask for help when we're empaths and we are also victims of these people, because we feel, I don't know about you guys, but I always felt like, I'm fine, everybody, I'm fine, don't worry about me, I'm good. I never wanted people to worry about me. So maybe that's just me, I don't know. What do you think, Tina?
Oh, I think that's all of us. So many of us are like, okay, I'll be fine, whatever. And then even though we're not fine,
right,
and we still kind of want to hold on to hope to this other, we tend to see the good in people to the point that we're not seeing the reality of a situation.
Yes.
and especially when we're involved in that situation, of how bad things really are, and how dangerous the situation really is. And so it's really important to realize, that you are a priority, that you matter, and to be able to start distancing yourself from this situation, to see it clearly, and to let go of that hope that they're going to be anything different. Statistically speaking, the odds of them hurting you or killing you are greater than the odds of them changing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Totally. And for the person who asked that question, let me say one more thing. You have a child with this person. So I want you to ask yourself the same question that I asked myself every time I thought about going on a date with anybody after I finally got away from my narcissist. And that was, is this person good enough to be with my child? And not only that, but do I want my child to grow up and be like this person? So look at that person you're with and ask yourself that question, because that's legit and serious. Okay. And if you have a child who's a female child, and the person is a man that you're dealing with, ask yourself, do you want your child to grow up and look for a person like that? Because that's what's going to happen if you stay. Think about those things, fellow mother. Okay. Sorry, I got a little blah, blah. Okay. You got one for us, Dana?
Yes. Okay. So Mickey asks, do narcissists intentionally hurt you? Are they aware that their behavior hurts people? My ex-narcissist says he realizes something is wrong in his brain. He's tried to fix it, but he can't control it.
Great question. I think personally, and if you want to go first, feel free. Do you want me to?
Either way is fine.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I think personally that, yes, I think some narcissists intend to hurt you because they enjoy the way it feels when you're in pain. And I think other narcissists aren't intelligent enough to recognize that they're hurting you. So I think it depends. When they tell you something's wrong in my brain and I don't know why I do what I do and I can't change, that's a semi-self-aware narcissist, or it's someone who's manipulating you to get what they want from you, which is probably more likely the case. What do you think, Dana?
100%. And really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Right. If he's doing something that's dangerous and destructive and he can't control it, then you need to distance yourself from that person. And I would say the same thing if that person, across the board, if they had a brain injury, if they had Alzheimer's, like for example, my grandmother had Alzheimer's and lived with us, and she would leave the stove on. She was doing stuff that was putting all of us in danger. Now we all know, right? Alzheimer's, like it was her brain. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't intentional, but she was going to kill us all, and not even mean to. And so at that point, towards the tail end, my mom ended up having to put her in a home where she didn't have an oven and, could have supervision and all of that. So we had to distance ourselves from her so that, this wasn't going to destroy all of us. And it might feel incredibly mean and hurtful and awful to distance yourself from a person who might show that level of self-awareness. And they're like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't help it. But, sinking yourself trying to save them isn't doing anybody any good.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually a really great point, I think, to look at it from that perspective, because obviously grandma didn't mean to do anything. Obviously, that's your grandma. She loves you, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. And that's how we should, those of you who are struggling with guilt, I can't leave this person. They love me. They need me. I love them. I need them, whatever. Think about grandma. That's a great point. Great point, Dana. Thank you. Really. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I like that perspective switch there. And I think that's something we all need to learn how to switch our perspective a little bit, Adrian asks, can a narcissist be abused by a narcissist parent when they are now an adult? Ooh, what a good question. Dana, I'll let you go first.
Sure. It's sort of, I view it this way as like, if you had a basket full of snakes, right? Like a rattlesnake and a black mamba and an anaconda, like they're all deadly, right? And who's going to win? And it's going to just depend on whatever snake is the strongest. And it's the same way with manipulative, destructive people. It's sort of like you could also put, if you had a cage match between like Jeffrey Dahmer and Charles Manson and Hannibal Lecter, or Casey Anthony or whoever, like who's going to win? Like they're all dangerous and they're all dangerous to each other. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, they do abuse each other and they can be in relationships with each other. Although most of the time, manipulative, controlling people tend to not seek out other manipulative, controlling people because they want to be in charge. But yeah, it's very common for an abusive person to have an abusive parent. And probably 9 times out of 10, that's why they are abusive to begin with, is because they grew up in that environment. They
Yeah,
grew up in that den of dysfunction, and that's what they know. So
I agree 100%. And I can't really even add anything to it. That's exactly the truth right there. 100%. Yeah. I mean, and I've seen it. I've seen it. And usually what I've seen is when you have a narcissist, the parent is either has been overindulgent and kind of like holds the narcissist up on their pedestal and pokes anybody who tries to knock them down, or they're, or they are equally abusive, and um, they're usually an enabler, but sometimes the narcissist becomes a narcissist because they are parented by someone who is so controlling, and so like they are always on this quest, just like we have been in our own lives, to please the narcissist, to please mommy or daddy. But in reality, that can never happen. And so it's just an ugly cycle, really. But Dana was absolutely 100% on point with her comparison. I like that.
And Belle of Amherst brings up a really great point too. And she says, my narcissist knows he has something very wrong. He tries to change, claims he can't control his anger or rage. Well, I told him it's interesting because he controls it at work for 40 hours a week. Great point, because that's the thing. And the reason they can control it is because there's consequences.
Yeah.
That they know if they rage at work, they're going to get fired. There's swift, severe consequences for their actions, but at home, they're more comfortable. So they can rage and rage and rage. And their target is either going to start walking on more eggshells, or maybe the target's even going to argue back, but the target's not going to leave. Yep. And until we get to that point where we're like, you know what? We've got to risk everything. Like, I am absolutely done. I cannot tolerate this anymore. You've got to get this figured out. Like, you need to get into therapy, whatever. Like, you need to do something. I can't live like this. That's the only chance that it's like just a sliver of hope that maybe that they can start to turn things around. But even then, most people, change is a long, drawn out, messy process. And for a person to change how they interact with the world like that is going to realistically take a very long time. And it's going to continue to cause trauma to everybody else that's around them until they actually do change.
Absolutely.
So for me, it's easier said than done. And I totally get that. But I wouldn't wait around for somebody who's traumatizing me to change. It's just, the damage is done. That is just too much.
And it's too easy for them to turn you into their emotional dumpster when they are holding it together at work all week,
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what they do. I've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it, Dana, when somebody acts normal outside of the house and then they come home and they emotionally vomit all over you, and then you're devastated and shaken and you can't sleep. And then you look over at them and they're sleeping like a freaking baby. Oh, it's so frustrating.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. And Kate in here says, and don't believe them when they say they'll get into therapy. And yes, that's the thing. Like, talk isn't just cheap, it's free. And so, manipulators love words because they're easy. It's so easy to just say, oh, I'm going to get sober. I'm going to lose 40 pounds. I'm going to do this and that. We all talk. Do you know what I mean? Yep. And it's talking is one thing, but action is what matters. And I would say for a person like that, they need to get into individual therapy on a weekly basis for the next 3 to 5 years before you even remotely consider anything. But even then, like, that's the thing, like, even then they're going to go into therapy and it's going to be all from their perspective. In their mind, they're the victim.
Yes.
So it's not even like they're going to go to therapy and be like, I have this terrible problem. I rage at my wife for absolutely no reason. Like that's not what they're going to say. Like they're not going to say your point of view. They're going to be like, my wife, she just, or my boyfriend or whoever is so forgetful and like does all these things to provoke me. And then I rage. They're going to spin it all the way around I would imagine for the therapist, it's very difficult to tell who
Yeah.
really has the issue here because they have such a twisted view of reality that, you know.
Yeah. And what I've seen with narcissists is when they do go to therapy, even if they are forced into it because of a crime they've committed or because they're in the military or whatever, which I have seen, they fool the therapist like 80-90% of the time. Even if they bring their victim with them, the victim gets blamed. And then if they do make any changes, it's behavioral only, like they behavior mod stuff. They change. Well, you need to tell your husband 3 times a week that he's handsome or whatever. And so a narcissist woman might be like, you're handsome. And then, or a narcissist man might be told, you need to take your wife out once a week on a date. So he's like, jump in the car. We're going to drive through McDonald's for our date, whatever, like they half-ass the modification. I'm sorry for saying that word.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's just a modification. And then when crisis occurs again in their little brains or in their little worlds, then they're back to emotional vomit and emotional dumpster situation, anyway. That's all.
Yes.
Yeah. You got another one, it looks like.
Oh, there's so many in here.
I know.
Okay, hold on. People are talking about doing a concealed carry. And let me just address this real quick here because I see a lot of people, my boyfriend included. We just had this discussion in our house the other day because we had a scary situation happen here. The thing with a gun is if you are going to go the route of getting a gun, you really need to make sure that you know how to use it and that you're comfortable using it and you know how to clean a gun and you know how to store a gun and that you're super familiar with the gun and that you're shooting it at a target range on a regular basis. Because here's the thing, more times than not, a gun is a very false sense of protection for people. And it's very difficult to hit a moving target. It's difficult to hit a still target. And, shooting a person is, I would imagine, very different than what it looks like in the movies. So I think it's important for a person to really think about owning a gun. And if that's something that's comfortable for you, and to whatever form of protection that you get, to make sure that you are actually comfortable using it. You don't want to hesitate. So one of the things that they'll tell you in like a concealed carry class is, if you shoot that gun, you need to be prepared to shoot to kill and not shoot warning shots, because there's a very solid chance that gun can be taken and then used against you. So for me personally, I'm more comfortable using mace. There's bear mace, there's wasp spray, stuff like that, where you're a good 20 to 30 feet away from the person. I have no hesitation using wasp spray on another person. Whereas I know myself well enough to know I would have hesitation using a gun. So yeah. just some things to consider as far as like self-protection goes.
Yeah. And I'm going to disagree with everything you said there and move on from that.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't really, yeah. Okay. So and I do agree with everything you said, FYI, like literally, but I just want to, yeah.
You can feel free to disagree. It's okay.
I don't disagree is the thing. I think you have to be careful and I think you have to be trained. I think guns are really a sensitive topic right now in this point in society. And so
that's a valid point.
Yeah. Yeah. But I agree with you 100% on your perspective. I do. Boy, my cats are being crazy today. Anyway, okay. I want to read a couple of quick statements that I thought were really good. Shannon O'Brien said, I've decided the only absolute I can't talk, y'all. It is our choice who to have relationships with. Even with a perfectly wonderful person, we still have the right to say no to a relationship. Truth. Own it, put it in your head. Yeah, that's important. One more thing Jillian said, when we wake up to the abuse, sometimes we realize friendships are toxic also. It's healthy to get out of these situations. My bestie kicked me at my lowest point and I immediately went no contact. And that's kind of how I roll as well today. Like I'm like, okay, so if I know someone's toxic, or even if I know someone just doesn't feel right to me, doesn't gel with me, like Dana and I talked about in another session before, there are plenty of people who don't make me feel that way in my life. So I'm good on that. Any comments on that?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the biggest, most exciting, frankly, like realizations that people have when they start to heal from this is the realization of when you get more in alignment with who you are, that's when you start really, your life starts working.
Yes.
And so many of us, we've kind of been living this life of default of expectations and shoulds of what maybe our society told us to do, our parents, our friends, our religion, our culture, what have you. And then we had this wake up call with abuse where we're like, okay, I definitely don't want that. But then like the first gal earlier, she's like, well, it's not abusive, but it is toxic. And then that's kind of like the next level. And then the next level is, well, it's not really toxic, but it's just not really rewarding.
Right.
Really get anything out of this person's just kind of, like, we're not connecting. There's no click.
Totally agree.
Doesn't mean that they're bad or wrong. It just means that that's not the person for you, and that's okay.
Right.
And then the next step is, okay, finding your people. Think people that you really, maybe you don't agree with them 100% on everything, but like you enjoy their company, it's rewarding. You have, whatever. Like you click.
Yes.
And then doing that across the board. So not just with people, but then also thinking about your family and thinking about, well, wait a minute. Okay. I have certain family members that I really don't like, and then certain ones that I really do like. And maybe it just never dawned on you that, yeah, you can spend less time with those people that are toxic and more time with the people that you enjoy.
Yeah.
And then you start thinking about jobs that you have and just thinking about like, okay, well, if I had a magic wand, and if I was actually in charge of building my life, like what would I want to have in it? And then you realize you do have that power.
Yes. You have the wand, baby.
You have the wand.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. Yes. Girl, we are right here. Okay. So I almost didn't even want to read this one, but I'm going to anyway. Cute Rabbit says, why do I think that probably all narcissists have problems with their sexual identity? They are gay. No. I have seen situations where there are gay narcissists who pretend to be straight. And I've seen gay narcissists who are openly, blatantly gay. And I've seen so many straight narcissists. It's not even funny. So I don't agree with that statement at all, personally. I don't think there are necessarily more gay narcissists than other types. And I think sometimes what you have is a situation where someone has been oppressed by society, by their where they live. Sometimes if you live in these small backwoods towns in the South, you can't be gay. Certain communities, in fact, just the other day, one of my daughter's teachers told me that the African American community tends to be less accepting of gay people in certain ways because of their religious stuff or whatever, and we live in a more African American area. And anyway, long story, but my point is, I don't agree with that statement, and I think it's unfair. But I know if your experience has been, okay, well, I was married to somebody who was secretly gay, and they lied to me about it and wasted all my childbearing years or whatever, that's a whole other ball of wax. Dana, would you care to comment on this?
Sorry, I was reading the comments about the gun stuff.
Oh, okay.
What were you saying?
So Cute Rabbit said she thinks that probably all narcissists have a problem with their sexual identity because they're gay. And I don't agree with that at all. Do you agree with that at all?
Oh, no. Gay, straight, bi, you name it. It's a personality, and personality is as varied as people, And,
there's no racial, there's no cultural,
religion,
there's no, not financial, nothing. Yeah.
Age. Yeah.
You have narcissists who live that are homeless and narcissists in mansions and everything in between. I mean, this is one of very few issues that really does go completely across the spectrum for every type of human in society, every society. I've talked to people in China. I've talked to people in Brazil. For clients, who were dealing with narcissists in different cultures, and it's mind blowing sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add something about the comment about the gun, and then I'll switch
Yeah.
topics.
Go
I
ahead. Go
know it's
ahead.
a controversial thing. So one of the commenters was like, WTF, what are you talking about? Shoot to kill. When I was talking about shoot to kill, if you're going to pull out a lethal weapon, if somebody's running at you full of adrenaline, if you're going into it thinking, well, I'm going to shoot to disable them, that's the incorrect thinking. The odds of you actually hitting them in the knee when they're moving is slim to none. So that's what I'm saying. Like, you need to be prepared to use whatever weapon you're using, because how you think it's going to go down and how it's actually going to go down are two very different things. And
Smart.
so you just got to be emotionally and physically prepared for whatever action you're going to take. That's what I was saying. I'm not saying that you should go for headshots necessarily unless, you need to, but
Right.
if,
Yeah.
just know your weapon, know yourself is what I'm saying.
And absolutely, and know yourself. And you know what? At one point in my life, I actually sat down, not because I was trying to kill anybody, but I actually sat down and asked myself, because I couldn't understand why somebody would do something like a Columbine situation or whatever. And I asked myself, could I ever take another person's life? And I think there's maybe one circumstance in which I could, and that is if I were directly saving my or my children's lives. Like if it was like they were going to kill me or I was going to kill them, maybe, but that's it. I don't think I have the right to take another person's life. And I think I would protect my children's life with my own life, but I don't think I have the right to take another person's life. And so you have to really ask yourself that question before you start carrying a gun, because Dana's right. You might have to shoot to kill that person. And we need to stop talking about this because they're going to kill us on the dings, but
yes, you're fine.
All right. Beverly Parmley, and this is another one that's going to ding us, but we're going to do it anyway. Let's do it.
Okay.
She says, my boyfriend's always watching bad movies. I'm just going to say that so that starts with a P, ends with an O. Okay. It's getting more and more disturbing to the point it scares me. And that is absolutely how it goes. There's a certain type of addiction that goes with that. And what happens is they become desensitized to your basic standard stuff. And it gets weirder and weirder and creepier. And to the point that they can't even be turned on by an actual physical human in front of them. There are some people who have gone so far as some of these, younger people who have always had it available to them. Like when I'm old, I'm 42. When I was a kid, we didn't have the internet in our houses. You know what I mean? You couldn't just pick up your phone and look at some naked people. You had to like borrow a magazine from your dad or something, or like whatever. And so it wasn't so readily available. Like you might be able to see some HBO stuff if you were lucky, but and even the channels that had the really bad stuff on them, they were, first of all, probably not nearly as bad as what we can get on the internet. And secondly, usually scrambled, So it was different. But now these kids who've never even been intimate with a person are now able to access that creepy, weird stuff you were talking about. And so some of them are having to have therapy to learn how to physically enjoy another person instead of just Rosie and her 5 sisters.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we live in a weird time.
Yes.
With technology and with artificial intelligence and
yes.
All different types of kind of AI that's getting more lifelike. And, you do kind of wonder, like, what are the long-term effects with how people relate to each other in society? And it's very strange. But, at the end of the day, if your boyfriend is really into some really disturbing, like adult films, and you're not okay with that, and especially if he's wanting to act that out in the bedroom, then that's a great time to start turning inward and asking yourself, okay, where are my deal breakers with this stuff? Like what's workable and what's not? And only you can answer that.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, especially with stuff like adult films or anything that's kind of fringe. Like you can always find people that are like, oh, I'm so into adult films, or I see no problem with that. Or people tend to be pretty divided on certain topics like that, or certain topics like drug use, or even like smoking cigarettes or whatnot. at the end of the day, it's what works or doesn't work for you.
Right.
And and here's the thing, like the more solid and grounded you are in your decision, the less you're going to be swayed by other people's feedback.
Truth. Yeah.
So, and it's okay. Like, it's totally okay. If you're like, this is some weird stuff and this is creeping me out. And I'm not okay with him watching it. I'm definitely not okay doing that. Then that's okay for that to be a deal breaker for you. That's a totally
Yes.
valid reason.
Yeah. I mean, I know some people will tell you watching those types of movies is cheating. And some people will say, what? Everybody watches it. It's no big deal. And there's everything in between. So, like Dana says, it doesn't matter what the societal rules are, what the standards are, whatever is right for you. You're allowed to have your deal breakers. And there are people out there who will be like, oh, yeah, that's a total deal breaker. I'd never do that if that's for you, or not for you. You know what I mean? I agree with you. And I wouldn't judge anybody for their choices, whether it was like, okay, not only will I watch it with you, but I'll do it with you, or no, I'm not looking at it, and no, I'm definitely not doing it. That's a deal breaker for me. I'm not going to judge any of y'all, because
Mm-hmm.
everybody falls in that spectrum, and I our society is horrible sometimes, but um, yeah. So I'm saying I understand all the perspectives in that area too. So yeah. All right, let's move on.
Yeah.
Mary Hanks says, I have a narc neighbor who stalks me and it's driving me crazy. She comes out on her porch and watches me. She memorizes my schedule. So she now stalks me and gaslights me. Now all her monkeys are messing with me. Ooh. All right. So Dana is the expert in the stalking stuff. I will let her start here. Go
Oh
ahead, honey.
gosh. Well, I guess my first question would be, do you rent or own?
Good
um,
question.
because if you're renting, you know, if you're renting, then it might just be time to move. I had a neighbor like that not too long ago, and she was something else, and it was exhausting. And I did not realize how stressed out I was, even though she wasn't even really stalking me or bothering me. It was the neighbor on the other side of me. And so she kept trying to get me in the middle of stuff. It was just, and she'd peek in my windows and
Ugh.
knock on my door. And I had a ground level apartment. And so she always knew when I was home. It was just too much. Like, it was just smothering and like exhausting. And so I didn't realize how stressed out I was until I moved.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, this is so nice to not have to worry about her knocking on my door or wanting to talk or stirring things up or any of the nonsense. And um, so I guess I would ask you that. Can you, if you can move, I would move, because all you have control over is yourself. You don't have control over her. And if she's got a whole bunch of people that are all roped up into your business, you can't control that. Um,
That's true. And I'll
you
tell you,
know,
I was in a situation, we owned our last home, and uh, we for 10 years we did just fine there, and then somehow we just we made this decision to decide to be friends with our neighbors. And that worked for about 6 months, and then it didn't. And the problem is, when it doesn't work, you can't easily just go away when they're your neighbors. So we were fine with the neighbors we'd always known, but there was another set of neighbors that lived near us that we'd never really been friends with before, and that we became friends with, and it just turned very sour. And it's a long, ugly story, but we moved. And we owned our house, and we were just like, no, we can't. We didn't want to wake up every day and walk out on our front porch and see the house with the people, and the people glaring at us and all the yuckiness. And so what I learned was, don't get too close to your neighbors. And that's
mhm.
harsh. It's harsh, but we have where we live now, we know the names of our neighbors. We're friendly with them, but we're not like friends with them. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's important to keep a certain respectful distance. So, like, we've got their backs. If we see somebody at their house, I know their number. I can text them and say, hey, somebody's taking pictures of your house, or whatever. That actually happened one time. But we kind of keep a friend, a certain distance, so that we don't get too personally involved, and we don't allow them to be too personally involved, and it prevents a lot of bad stuff. Good.
Yep.
Yeah.
It really does. And, there's definitely a benefit to kind of keeping arm's length, keeping things. Oh, who was it? Was it Jim Rohn? Maybe it was Zig Ziglar. It was one of those guys who had said something like there's a difference between being friendly and familiar.
Yes.
And I really like that. And that the difference is kind of having that arm's length. Because,
Yes.
so for example, the neighbor that I was telling you about who was just all up in my business all the time, she reminded me of the neighbor on the old TV show Bewitched.
Yes.
Mrs. Kravitz, I think her name was. But it started, these situations, I tell you, there's a pattern and they tend to all start off very similarly. And when I first moved in, she was just kind of like my instant best neighbor friend and came over and brought me a gift and was very chatty and just very quick to kind of want to take me into her world. And at first, the first few days, I was like, oh, well, she's so nice. And it'd be nice. We could maybe have a glass of wine on the porch with her. And, and I was very quick because I was new to town. It's the same. I was new to town, didn't really know a lot of people. And I thought, oh, well, she just seems really nice. And then I slowly began to realize like this lady just seems very kind of difficult and demanding, and began asking favors and was knocking on my door a lot and just didn't have a good sense of boundaries. And
Yeah.
over time, her behavior became like kind of more and more erratic. And, then other neighbors began noticing it too. And so that was when I really realized like, okay, it's not just me being an introvert. It's not just me because of my past with different difficult people in my life. Like it's her. Like it's legitimately her. And now I really need to take some action and get some boundaries in place to kind of nip this in the bud before it goes any further.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's the other thing I would say is if you can't move right now, consider changing your routines. Go out the back door instead of the front door. Shannon, if Shannon's still here, she'll have some good suggestions for you. Shannon O'Brien, she had to kind of hide out from her narcissist mother a little bit, who lived very close to her for a while, and she has some good tips on that. So Shannon, if you have a minute, throw them in the chat for us.
Well, and and two, I would go one of two ways depending on how, if they're just nosy and annoying or if they're potentially dangerous.
Yeah.
If they're dangerous, I would move, I would avoid them. Like Angie was saying, I would change your schedule, change your routine, and really just try to get the heck out of there, because that's no way to live. If they're like more of like the Mrs. Kravitz kind, like my next door neighbor, who I wasn't worried about her, she just was crazy. You could always go the other way and just be like, you know what, I'm really going to give her something to talk about. You know what I mean?
Let's give them something.
Let's really give them something to talk about, and start
it.
doing all kinds of crazy things. So, and just kind of make it a game and not try to be bothered by it, because you don't have control over it. So you might as well try to have fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, now this is an interesting point that Becky Horst makes. She says that phasing out can cause thing. I think she means to say it's awfully close to intermittent conditioning. And that's a really good point. When we were talking about the friend thing, to kind of slowly drop off. That's an excellent point. So you would want to be very careful to do it that way. I have found that the fade out is effective if you just sort of eventually stop responding, and it's harsh, but sometimes you just have to go that route, but I agree with you. That's an excellent point, that if you're not careful, it might feel like intermittent conditioning, which is exactly how the narcissist keeps us hooked in the first place. So be careful with that. You don't want to intentionally hurt someone if they're just just a little bearing or whatever. Anyway, you've got one, Dana.
Yep, I agree, and no contact is different from the silent treatment. And it's so I think when we start to kind of fade things out or go gray rock and then start to kind of go no contact, just like Angie said, we're not wanting to play games with anybody else. Like you're the direction that you want to head, and you're taking steps to move in that direction. You're not going, you're not doing the whole like love bombing and then, that the sweet mean cycle or hot cold. Like you're not doing any of that.
Yeah.
You're just really backing up.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. And again, I think it's not like the best option all the time, but if you can do it, you know, if you want to avoid confrontation, you just have to make a choice to do it that way or to have the confrontation. Because sometimes if you just rip the band-aid off, it's faster, it's easier. But if you're so I know that personally I was very anxious when I went through that. And granted, it was before I recovered. It was before I understood what I or I'm we're all still in recovery, aren't we? But it was before I started to understand what I was dealing with. But at the time I did not want to go through the confrontation. The idea of saying to her, I just can't be your friend because you're too negative, made my stomach hurt. It made me feel sick and I couldn't do it. And so I'm coming from that perspective when I'm telling you, if you can't, and now today, if I'm forced to, I will say, I just can't be your friend because you're too negative. I will, but I don't want to have to do that. So still, so I just go no contact if necessary. I don't get too close to anybody too fast is what I do now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That has been, man, probably the hardest lesson for me, and the one that I keep having to revisit time and time again, is to remind myself, like, I set the pace of things.
Yes.
And to just slow things down. Like, if a person is really great and you feel a connection, they're still going to be really great, and the connection's still going to be there in a month or 6 months. Like, it's okay to go slow and to like let things grow at a healthy pace. And yes, because the old me, so like with my neighbor, that the old me would have kept going, would have let her set the pace of things, and would have continued to go full speed ahead, thinking like, oh, this is so nice. And I have this new neighbor BFF, and like, she's so great. And hey, you know what? Come on over for wine and for dinner. And I would have matched her level of intensity, and not realizing what I was doing to feed into that, and not realizing that any of that was a problem.
Right.
So, she came on full speed. I would have come on full speed, totally misreading that whole situation, thinking, oh, she's so nice and so fantastic. And what a lucky me. I have this amazing neighbor who's so fantastic. Right. And then things would have gone really bad, really fast. Now, let me give you another example of that. So, similar situation. I don't know, 10 years ago, I had two other neighbors. Okay. Both of whom were also very nice. They both came over. My husband and I just moved into town. And they both brought over gifts. And one brought over, I think, like a loaf of bread. And then one had invited us for dinner. And, so both the actions on their end were the same, but the results ended up being different. And so here's how they were different. So the couple that brought over the loaf of bread, they brought it over as like a goodwill gesture, and we're very like, hey, you guys should come over. We have parties every now and again. It would be great to get to know you better. And so it was this gesture, but it wasn't followed up with continual intensity.
Yes.
Versus my other neighbor, it was a nice gesture, but it was continual intensity that then I started feeling obligated to go over there, obligated to have her over for dinner. And it was just moving too quickly, and it was just too much too soon. I wasn't seeing her clearly. She wasn't seeing me clearly.
Yeah.
Right. Like she didn't know me. She didn't know if I was going to be her new neighbor BFF. It was just kind of all of this idea of who she thought I was and who I thought she was.
Yeah.
And then when that rosy veil of good intentions wears off, then you realize I don't really have a lot in common with this person. And now things are so awkward because we live next door to each other, and, like we're BFFs, but we don't have that much in common. Like, then you have to kind of distance yourself. So if you go slower and you let things kind of, shake out how they're going to shake out, it's just a win-win for everybody involved.
I totally agree. Yeah. And I think that's what we did wrong in our situation. We thought, okay, well, we've lived across the street from these people for 10 years. So obviously we kind of know them, but we didn't. and we like literally just suddenly were BFFs, and suddenly everything was like, I thought, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. Here we are, we have all these friends in the neighborhood, and we had friends already, but we were not super tight with any of them. And now we had these people, and we could like right across the street from our house. We could have barbecues and it was great. We had so much fun. And then, you know, and then we didn't. And things got weird and uncomfortable and oh, it was just not good.
And
So,
it's the same thing, right? Like
yeah,
it's that slow decline where like all of a
exactly.
sudden they have some weird behavior that you're not okay with and you're like, "Oh, that's odd." And then
Yeah.
you can either justify it and keep going over there or you can start to distance yourself. But it's so easy to justify it because you're like, "Well, we've already have this like ongoing rotating dinner party, our
Yeah.
house, their house." And
Yeah. And
you
then it's
start
weird.
justifying stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so lesson learned.
Yes.
you know yeah, but and I think that I think above all, one of the things you said really stuck out to me, and I've said this a bazillion times. That's not a real number, by the way, I don't think, but uh, but it just that take it slow, because the people that are the really great people, and the same goes for dating, the people that are the one, whoever your one is, if you jump into bed today or you wait 6 months, 6 months later, they're still going to be the one. And if they are the one, they're not going to be like, what? How dare you not jump into bed or jump into a relationship with me? Because they're going to be like, I understand that you need time and I'm willing to wait for you. Like,
Yes,
you know?
totally. It's making that shift
hmm
between I like you so much, let's move at full speed ahead versus I like you so much, let's slow things down.
Yes. And if you care about yourself and them, you will slow things down, in my opinion, because
Yes.
then you'll have a better chance of being successful in that relationship. Yeah, we are like over time. Uh,
Okay.
do you have one more you want to grab, or do you want me to pick one real quick?
How about you look for one and I'll look for one?
Okay, perfect. All right. Now this one, let's see. This one is for Julian De Donatis. Julian is new to my channel. Hello, Julian, and welcome. He says, some narcissist mothers have a son husband relationship with their sons. Has anyone ever seen or experienced this? I have also felt like I had to parent my mother, which is bizarre. This is an excellent question. Yes, I've seen it. And I've also seen daughter father relationships that resembled husband wife relationships. They call them daughter wives. And not that they're actually doing anything um, on an intimate, gross level in most cases, but where the mother leans on the son, like, oh, I can't change the light bulb, and she calls her son from 3 towns over to come over and change the light bulb, or the son needs to support the mother emotionally, physically, sometimes financially, and I've seen the opposite, where the daughter will come over and cook dinner for dad. And so I've seen some people do it to the point that they end up not ever getting married and not ever having children, because they are parenting their parents after a while. So I've seen it. I've seen it. It's unfortunate, and narcissistic mothers are common for it, especially because they they're different. I think the narcissistic mother is different because she may be an altruistic type, as in that when she does something, she does it because she has strings attached to it. When she does you a favor, and I think sometimes they play the poor me thing a lot, and they're and the guilt trips a lot, and their sons especially feel responsible for them. And I see it with the daughters too, but the sons, what I've seen is narcissistic mothers tend to be nicer to their sons than their daughters. And so their sons feel a different kind of responsibility to mom. What do you think about this, Dana? Thoughts?
From what I've seen, it's more like the moms turn the sons into husbands
Right.
and their daughters into like Cinderella.
Great. Oh, yes,
You
that's
know?
exactly what it is. Yes.
Yeah. So there's a
Yes.
term for this. It's called parentification. And it's when a parent turns a child and the child and the parent switch roles.
Yeah.
So the child is taking care of the parent and the parent needs to be taken care of. And it's a form of abuse and it's not appropriate.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
and then there's also another term called emotional incest,
hmm
which is very much along the same lines, but it's basically a parent turning the child into an adult and into somebody that can meet their emotional needs.
Exactly.
And so it's important for parents to realize like this child, even though a child is an extension of the parent, that they are their own autonomous being, and that they're not there to fulfill our hopes and dreams and emotional needs, that they have their own life and that they need to go out and do their own thing, and that their job is not to take care of us.
And I would caution those of us who are in this room right now to this. When you have a child who's empathic, and as they get older, they're going to do things they're going to try to comfort you if they see you going through emotional abuse. If they see someone hurting you emotionally, physically, or otherwise, they're going to feel protective of you, and they're going to feel like they want to comfort you. And you need to watch yourself, and you need to see if that happens. You need to make some changes, because you are putting your child in that place, in that moment. And I've seen it. My son, my middle son, is a total empath, and if he thinks I'm upset about anything, he's trying to comfort me, and I'm like, dude, settle down, you're a kid. But I still listen to him because he's my child, and I don't want him to feel invalidated. But I don't want him to feel responsible for my own emotions. And so I do everything that I can to allow him to understand that emotions are natural and healthy and whatever, but I don't allow him to take responsibility for the way I feel about stuff. And I'm not like a really negative person anyway, but I've seen him try to comfort me, and I've seen myself say, settle down now, in a more polite way, obviously. But
And that's a very valid point. I think so oftentimes this stuff can be unintentional. And
yes.
if you do have a sensitive child, and I think to let them know, what, hey, I'm crying or I'm upset and I'm going through a hard time, but you know what, honey, I'm going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need to worry about it. I appreciate your concern, but I will figure this out and we are going to be fine. I'm going to be okay. You're going to be okay. We're going to get through it.
Yes.
And because they don't have control because they're a child. And
Yes.
so continuing to turn a child into an adult, or even turning a minor child into a friend and relying on them, it's too much for them because they don't have control. They're still trying to navigate their own emotions and grow up. And it's too much. So I think you covered that really well, Angie.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Okay. You got one more for us. And then
I think that's it. I think that was a long enough, enough one that we covered. So thank you guys so much for being here today and for all these amazing questions. And we'll see you next Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yep. And that's 12:30 p.m. CST. We'll be on Dana's channel next week, so make sure you subscribe over there if you haven't yet. After this video, I will make sure I link out to Dana's channel here, but she's linked on my, if you click through to my channel here, you can see her channel directly to the right of my channel. I've got it on the top. So you can subscribe and make sure you hit the bell notification so you can see us next time and see whenever she goes live in the meantime or uploads a video. She's awesome. Okay.
Yeah. And ditto that at my channel. You can see all of Angie's stuff on my channel too. So.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay, you guys. Thank you. Thanks, Dana. Bye-bye. See you soon. All right. I'm going in ending meeting. Okay. Later.
Okay.